Well, I take my privilege as sort of the senior student here to just give a personal anecdotes of my relationship with Frank before having him come on for concluding. I'm of Scotch-Irish descent, raised as a Presbyterian, basic tenet being you're predestined. Predestined in the sense of the church is you're predestined for salvation under Christ. But in many ways I found myself predestined. I went off to MIT. I ran track my freshman year. The captain of the track team that year was Don Morrison. Contemporary of mine at MIT at the time was Dave Walker. And that sort of has set my career in marketing ever since. And I really couldn't sleep last night as seeing all the people at the reception and people here and their anecdotes. I just flooded my own memory of my interactions with the people. When I was a senior at MIT in chemical engineering, I did a job search. I interviewed various places and had offers from DuPont to work in their gunpowder factory. Unfortunately, I didn't seriously consider that because I didn't realize what Lyndon Johnson was going to do for the gunpowder industry a year or two later. I ended up accepting an offer at Roman Haas, a chemical company that makes plexiglass. But during my senior year, in I believe it was February, I read an article in Forbes magazine that was very complimentary of the new program at Purdue for scientists and engineers to learn something about management, and it was a 1 calendar year program. And I thought, well, geez, at some point I'd like to get into management. Maybe I'll work as an engineer for 20 years, but eventually I want to go into management. And so I said, well, maybe I should look at that. I could last a year in Lafayette. Even Lafayette I could survive. So I said, well, I have to take the GMATs. Well, the GMATs at that point weren't until May. And I took the GMATs and fortunately did reasonably well. And I was going to start work with Roman Haas July 1, and like the 1st of June, Purdue accepted me into the MSIA program and gave me a modest scholarship. So I told Roman Haas, well, I'll come a year from now. I mean, what could they say? So I trekked off to Lafayette. A lot of my classmates did systematic searches on MBA programs and where they wanted to go, with basically an automatic admit into the Harvard Business School from MIT. No rational search. Off I went to Purdue. I'm at Purdue, and it's a lockstep program, so they pay attention to student progress and the like. And in the middle of the first term, John Dutton, the production professor, called me up after class and said, Len, we want you to think about going into the doctoral program. And, oh, by the way, would you please bring up your grades? Well, at that point, I had 3 A's, a C, a D, and an F. The A's were obviously in the quantitative subjects. The D was in organizational behavior. And the F was in marketing. Well, I had trouble getting my hands around marketing. It was taught by this guy by the name of Frank Bass. And he came in and told these war stories about his experiences. And very interesting and entertaining. But just sort of grasping what I'm supposed to know out of all this was very difficult for me to have a very defined view of the world. I would go on to improve my grades and decide to go into the doctoral program. And I took it as a message from the management faculty that they realized they couldn't place me on the job market and they had to do something with me. I decided to do marketing, of all things, and it was because of Frank's enthusiasm. I have never encountered anybody anywhere who has such intrinsic enthusiasm for what they're doing. And his enthusiasm swept me into marketing. Of course, Frank, being the nice guy he is, I entered the marketing doctoral program, and what does he do? He and his Mustang go off to England for a year. So I start working with Charlie King, who does diffusion adoption, more behavioral, but I basically say, well, I can do a quantitative model of diffusion and adoption somehow, and I'll work in this area, and it seems like easy kill compared to what else is going on there in the time. And Charlie King was a personality. He was a short person, but personality projected twice as tall, and so I think the Purdue people who had him referred to him as Napoleon. And so I'm blithely working along with Charlie the first year. Come the fall of the second year, Frank Bass returns. And at Purdue, they had these typically 6 offices on a corridor, and the doctoral students were shared offices in the middle corridor. And one day, Frank Bass walks in and says, "I bought your contract from Charlie King." No questions. No interaction. I was now working for Frank. During that period then, I went on to do a dissertation under Frank. He was very generous in getting Leo Burnett to finance my doctoral dissertation. Seymour Banks was a good friend of his at the time, and they got Kellogg to agree to sponsor the project. Because Kellogg's agreed, A.C. Nielsen agreed to release data, not only what at the time was the store audit data, but not only for Kellogg, but the advertising of everybody in the industry, which they were sharing. I would get a chance with Frank then to go to A.C. Nielsen, where we would have lunch with not only A.C. Nielsen Jr., who was about 50 at the time and president of the company, but A.C. Nielsen Sr., probably one of the few people still around who's met the senior. And the senior sat there, razzing his son the whole time. They were just starting to build corporate headquarters in Chicago, and the father would say things, well, anytime a company starts to build a monument to itself, it's on the downhill decline. And as soon as we left, the elder Nielsen said, "Who were those people?" He didn't even know who we were. And he was outraged that we were going to do research with the A.C. Nielsen data for free. His position was that all marketing research would be paid for. Frank's very generous in buying meals for people when he was around, introduced to Turbo at the Cape Cod room, the Drake Hotel. Does that all sound familiar? And during my dissertation year, and indeed somewhat before that, basically every day Frank would come in the morning and ask me, well, what have you done since I saw you when I left last night? He would come and collect me for lunch, and virtually every day for a year or two, we had lunch together during the week, often with Mike Pessimer. I'd come back after lunch. Before he would leave for the day, he said, well, what have you done this, this afternoon, all in a very nice way, but you better have, you felt you had to do something. So I think my dissertation proceeded much faster than even he thought it was, so that in fact got done, and ended up with getting some recognition from the American Marketing Association for my completed dissertation, and was now known as the John Howard Award. And now there are, I think, 3 of Frank's first 9 doctoral students won what would be called John Howard Doctoral Dissertation Awards. And the basic thought that I have in terms of coming out of Purdue, of all the people that if I'd done extremely rational search and considered all the possibilities, the best person for me personally to have chaired my dissertation is Frank Bass in all the world. I have no rational path to that optimal solution. It's better to be lucky than good, but Frank, very appreciative of everything you've done for me. I don't have time to, I could go on probably for the next hour with more Frank stories. I'll just conclude with one in the introduction, and that is, in 1981, UT Dallas was looking for a marketing scientist. And I don't know whether we've ever talked about this, but they made a job offer. But the marketing scientist, Len Parsons, turned them down. Now, you're getting pretty low when Len Parsons can turn you down. So they said, well, what can we do now that Len Parsons has turned us down? Well, maybe we could put out more money out there. Maybe we can find a chair for a person. Maybe we can go and find somebody who has roots to Texas. Maybe we can go to land-grant school with an ag college and maybe get somebody who is interested in getting away from those dairy cows and back to real cattle and steers. And so they traveled to West Lafayette and pulled out this obscure marketing scientist by the name of Frank Bass. If you can't have Parsons, well, Bass isn't not bad second best. And so Frank is going to come up here and tell us whatever happened to Frank Bass. But I have, in the sense of marketing generalizations, 2 items that I think characterize Frank. One is what you learned from Frank was the joy of learning. His enthusiasm translated into a joy of learning, which I think has stood everybody in good stead. And the other, and I had an anecdote related to this, but I won't go into it. Frank is a gift that keeps on giving. I keep getting opportunities because I was Frank's student. And this is almost 40 years later in my case. And it's an amazing compliment to his power and influence. Frank?